So Peter Lyngdorf, I know a little bit about you, but there's a lot to know about you, and that's what we're going to go through.
I'm ready.
Okay, it started up. When did you get interested in hi-fi, not as a business, but just in general?
That was more or less exactly 1963, when I was 10 years old. I heard the Beatles on the radio, and I fell in love. I thought that guy, Lennon-McCartney, that guy was fantastic. I didn't realize it was two people. So
Okay.
So it was just Lennon-McCartney.
Strange first name, right?
Making all those songs. And I was flabbergasted. And at that time we had only public radio, and pop music was not well thought of, you know. Had to be classical or jazz or some real music, not pop music. So pop music was 1 hour every afternoon. Okay. So I was waiting on the radio to hear the next thing from the Beatles, and it was always like something we never heard before. And it's only in my later years...
And this was in Denmark?
It was in Denmark, yes. It was only in the later years I realized it was because the music was genius. But anyway, I decided I wanted to buy myself a tape recorder so I could record from the radio. Of course, there was a microphone in front of the radio, which was not really good, but I could hear the songs again and again and again. It was the only way I could hear the songs, because the LPs at that time were 100 kroner, which translates in today's money and too much money,
yeah.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
So I started working as a gopher in a company, and was making enough money to have half the money. And
not in an audio company, just in a company?
No, just to buy my tape recorder. It was a Tandberg Norwegian tape recorder. And then I just got so hooked on good sound and so on. I started to build kit speakers, and I bought myself a more expensive tape recorder. I got myself a full-time job when I was still working in high school, or I was attending high school, not very much, but I had a full-time job next to high school. I left my parents' home when I was 15 because my dad did not like the Beatles.
Oh.
Or Rolling Stones, or Led Zeppelin, or whatever came along at that time. So I was totally good friends with my parents, but I left home because I wanted to play my music.
Okay.
All the time.
So you got an apartment?
No, I had a room in a basement,
okay.
In a villa. Had some people that were half deaf. So it was not a nice place to live, but I could play my music. So I went through high school. I had terrible grades because I was always making speakers, and I had my full-time job, and I was sleeping the first hour or two when I got to school. I was working as a night portier in a hotel. Oh. So I got to school at 7:30, and I was sleeping the first 1 or 2 hours because I was so tired.
This is a Danish rebellion.
Yeah, it is. And but anyway, I finished high school, and after that, and I got the lowest grades in the history of the school, and I think they still stand as the lowest grade ever, because I calculated very carefully what I needed to just pass.
I did that too.
Okay.
I didn't get the lowest grades, but I got low grades.
That's a very good omen. Anyway, so I got myself a job in marketing for 3 weeks or so, and then I thought, no, I know about marketing. Then I got myself a job in shipping, because that time it was customs and shipping, and all of that was complicated. And I had that for about 1 month, and then I quit that, and then I started to import hi-fi products from the UK.
Okay. Any brand names?
Louder.
Okay.
Loudspeakers was one of the first things. I had a Renault 4, 28 horsepower.
Okay.
It was really good when I had a tailwind.
Yeah.
But I would drive to England in that.
Okay.
With the ferry and so on,
yeah.
And up to Louder, and I could fit exactly 2 Louder speakers in the back if I had taken all the seats out and so on. So that was how I started my business. And then one day I was in a shop in Tottenham Court Road, where all the hi-fi shops were at that time. And I looked at a turntable called Transcriptor Skeleton. And I thought, oh, that's a great looking turntable. And it so happened that the owner of the company, David Gammon, he was in the shop. And we started chatting.
Right.
And he said, so you're going to buy this for yourself? You have some friends? And so, yeah, I have lots of friends. Why don't I send you 10? and you can see if you can sell them. When you've sold them, you can send me the money. And
What year would have this been?
that was in 73.
Okay.
And he sent me 10 turntables with no invoice attached. He says that you pay when you've sold them.
Okay.
And I sold them and I sent him the money.
Okay.
And he sent me 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
He had some foresight to get
Yeah.
his business going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he actually got my business going. And I think he never realized what he started.
Right.
In
No,
a
yeah, I
way.
know.
Yeah.
A transcriptor, that was in A Clockwork Orange, right? Was that the
No,
turntable?
that was a different branch of the same company.
Right, right.
They kind of split up at that time, and I don't know the exact story, but that
Yeah.
transcriber company is still the one that makes turntable nowadays.
Okay.
And I don't know what happened with David Cameron. But
Okay.
anyway, they were glass turntables, hardened glass and so on. And then I started to sell to hi-fi dealers in Denmark. And that was where I got the first shock about how this business is run, because I talked to one of my friends who was a local radio dealer, and I asked him what would be a good margin for a dealer, and he said, 50% would be a good margin. And I thought it was markup. I didn't
Right.
understand the difference, because what you
Yeah.
add to the product or what they
yeah,
need.
yeah,
So-
margin.
So I sent him the first invoice. He said, that's not a 50% margin. that's only 33% margin.
Right.
Whew, they're going to have a lot of money. Whew, they're going to have
I
as
better
much as
own the
I
store,
have,
right?
and the manufacturer. This is crazy.
Yeah.
So anyway, it took me a few years to really come to terms with all of that. But I was selling to dealers for 3 years, and then I got fed up because there was so much at that time competition from low quality Danish manufacturers of loudspeakers. You know, anybody could make a cheap cabinet, buy some cheap drivers from Taiwan was the cheap place at that time. Put a little bit of component in so that you didn't burn the tweeter, and that was good enough.
Yeah. I
And
think some people still do that today.
and I was kind of fed up with that, because it was everything was cheapened. But anyway, next thing that happened was I met Gene Sowinski from Servin Vega,
What year about?
76.
Okay.
That was in March of 76 at the Penta show in London. And there was a regular British hi-fi show. And there was one room where I could hear the door was vibrating outside. It was like, wow. I said, I have to go in and listen, because I was all into rock and roll at that time. And inside was Gene Sowinski himself, the only time he's ever done a show in Europe. And he was sitting with a tape recorder, because the bloody turntables couldn't work with a 15-inch woofer,
Yeah, yeah, that's
floor
true.
file woofer and so on there. And we started chatting, and we had a really good chat. And he said, Peter, you'll be my distributor in Denmark. I said, sure, but I'm not a big company, you know. I have 6 turntables, and they're at the end of my bed in my little tiny room.
Yeah.
I trust you, he said. We work together. We'll fix that.
Okay.
So he sent a ton of speakers over as samples, all without invoice. I could pay when I told them
Wow.
one time. So we had a DC-9 landing in the local airport filled with Servin Vega speakers, including the earthquake horns and everything.
Right. Now, were you making a good living at this time?
I was making a living. I still had my Renault 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, 28 horsepower. I had actually changed the engine to a 32 horsepower, so it wouldn't take much longer when I had a headwind.
Okay.
That was actually because the first engine burned. Anyway, so he sent me the speakers. And I ran around to dealers and I showed them the speakers, and they liked the speakers. They were really good and all of that. And they would play louder than anything else, which was important at that time. So I got enough orders to buy a 40-foot container. And I went down to my local bank and said, I need to buy a 40-foot container. I don't know, $40,000 worth of speakers at that time, which was a sizable
lot of money.
amount. And the bank, director of the bank, was a small bank, said, but Peter, you don't have so much money. I said, no, that's why I go to
here.
the bank. Oh yes, of course, we're the bank, we have the money. So finally he said, okay, we're going to buy the speakers. They're going to be shipped to the bank, and we will store them in our canteen. We have a ton of space in the canteen, so we take the container here, put them in the bank, and you can sell from here. Then we have
That's their
the
collateral. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was how we did the first shipment.
Wow.
A flexible bank.
Yes, yes.
That doesn't happen today because the computer says no.
Yeah. And also manufacturers usually ship with invoices and all
Well,
that, right?
yeah. But anyway, Gene and I became best friends, and there's a long story to that and so on. And I ended up running Vega Europe
Okay.
as a director, CEO of the company.
And when was
at
that?
the same time, the main supplier for the company.
Yes. And when was that
in
about?
81, 82,
Okay.
something like that. So that was really real business starting.
Yeah.
And I started to make a little bit of money.
So that's where this became.
That's when I founded the Audionaut Corporation in 76.
Distribution.
Distribution, yeah.
Okay.
Distribution to dealers.
Yeah.
And it grew, and then the year after I met the people from NAD.
Okay. Which was who at the time?
That was Marty Borish.
Okay.
He was the founder of NAD. Marty Borish was the CEO of Acoustic Research.
Okay.
And Acoustic Research had started an electronics company,
Okay.
or electronics division. But when they were sold to Teledyne, they wanted to close up all electronics. And Marty and a few other guys thought, we take that on, we continue. And they created New Acoustic Dimension.
And when was that? 70s.
That was in the 70s. That was
73, because they just did their 50th anniversary.
Something like that from the very early start, could have been around that time, yes.
Yeah.
I think some of these dates get a little bit blurry.
Right, but yeah, they're saying 73 because it's the 50th anniversary.
Yeah. Anyway, I met them in 76 in the autumn, could be 76, yeah, at the Oktoberfest.
Hmm.
That was a party. But that was the jokes like this with beer and so on. I don't remember much from that. But I got the line of product for Denmark. And we were selling like hotcakes.
Yeah. My first amplifier was an NAD in early 80s. I mean, that was a really, and still is, a really hot brand.
I, of course, maneuvered myself into the product committee within a few weeks.
Okay.
So I started to have also a little bit of, a lot of discussions with the engineers and so on. I did a smart thing back in Denmark. At that time, Brüel and Kjær, B&K, the microphone measurement technology company, they were huge, 2,000 employees. And I sent them a couple of the amplifiers. And of course, they measured everything because they could measure everything.
Yeah.
They said, wow, this is the best amplifiers ever. And
Yeah.
they cost not so much.
Yeah.
So the Brüel and Kjær staff, they were buying $10,000 worth of amplifiers and receivers, everything per week.
Oh, wow.
That was the basis of
From
my
you?
business. From me.
Wow.
They were buying, and they were selling to some of their friends, I did.
Yeah, yeah.
But they had a company account and so on,
Yeah.
or a corporate account. So it was a terrific business.
No kidding.
I was on the product committee at NAD also when Eric Edwardson was hired.
That was the EE when they had
Yeah,
BEE.
Bjørn Erik Edwardson.
Yeah.
He passed away a few years ago, very, very sad. I was in London just a few days before, and I called him, and he said, Peter, I'm sorry, I would love to see you, but yeah, because he became my employee later, of course. But anyway,
We'll
NAD
get to
was,
that because you owned
yeah,
NAD
yeah,
for a while.
Yes, but NAD was really also the next push to making a real business. So I was making money.
Mhm.
I was selling to dealers until 1980. I got fed up with the dealers because I thought it was always about, oh, we have a special powers. Now this is on discount. This is on discount. The price before was this and da. And everything was so fake. And I had a background of being a super enthusiastic hi-fi customer. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is not, it's not right. They say this receiver is now a good offer because it cost twice as much last month, but nothing was sold at that price anyway. There was so much fake and cheating and bullshit. And then we had some local competition on loudspeakers we had one speaker company, I'm not going to name any names, but they had this spiel about loudspeakers. They were making horrible speakers. absolutely horrible speakers. Absolutely, totally, crazily bad speakers. But they were selling because they made an offer to the dealers that if you buy 150 pairs, you get 6 months credit, you get a huge margin, and you get a trip to Thailand without your wife. It was that kind of deal, you know. And we would have 3 or 4 or 5 months where we didn't sell anything because they had to get rid of all their garbage.
Yeah, yeah.
This company, by the way, one show they were showing a 3-way speaker. You couldn't remove the grill. And I just looked at it, and they were playing it out of this hole where the mid-range was supposed to be, because you could see kind of a mid-range. There was coming air all the time. I said, so what is that? Is that the bass reflex port? And the owner of the company, he was very honest actually. He said, no, that's just a hole in the box to make some more bass. I said, why do you want to make it look like a mid-range? Wouldn't it, isn't that cheating a little bit? I said, maybe. But you know what? Actually, you're right. You know, we could put in a mid-range, because what we pay for the mid-range is not much more than it costs to make that silk screen.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was our competition. I get so fed up.
Yeah.
I started HiFi Klubben.
Oh, okay, that's the store that you still have today.
That's what I still have today, yes.
Yeah.
But in my old young days, I was kind of smart, because when I started to sell to dealers, I always put in a warranty card for every box we sent out. There was a warranty card. People had to fill it in with their name, address, phone number.
And then you had a mailing list.
That meant that in 1980,
yeah,
when I was done with those dealers that screwed me, I had some good friends also. There were some really nice people also. But I was screwed a few times with, you know, one guy going bankrupt, transferring all the goods to his wife, and da-da-da-da-da-da. So anyway, I had all the names of everybody who ever bought from my company. And that was the start. So I started HiFi Klubben. You had to sign in to become a member, so you got our newspaper. And I wanted to educate people to know more about product, to understand product more, because I thought if people are more educated, they will want to buy better product, and I want to sell better product. And I don't want people to be screwed about special offers and so on. I want them to be knowledgeable.
Right.
Because a knowledgeable company or a customer is a much better partner for us than a guy who doesn't know diddle about anything.
Right. And that was just in Denmark, the HiFi
That
Klubben
was
at the
just in
beginning.
Denmark,
Because
yes.
now we might get to this across Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that went really well. We doubled the turnover almost the first year. And of course, I didn't have any problems with credit and things like that. Everything was fine. But actually, again, a banking situation. I had made all the plans. I told my bank, this is my plan, this is how I do HiFi Klubben, this is a budget, everything like that. And of course, budget at that time was handwritten. No computers, remember? There was no computers. There was even not a typewriter that could track back and so on. There was nothing.
Yeah.
All handwriting. And the bank said, looks good, looks like a good plan. When I opened the HiFi Klubben, the 1st of May 1980, the bank closed the account. They closed my banking account, said, oh, we better check that this is really going to be good before we open the account again.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Why the change of heart?
I don't know.
Okay.
Then I went to another bank down the street. I asked to talk to the bank manager. And we talked for 1 hour. And he said, and he looked at my business plan, everything. He said, Peter, that's a damn good plan. How much do you owe the other place? And at that time, it was like, my account was around $70,000, which in today's money is quite a bit, you know. It translates to $210,000, something like that in today's money. He said to me, Peter, you go down to the cashier, and she'll make out a check for that amount. And you go and give that to the other bank, and you come back tomorrow and we fix everything for you, okay?
Yeah.
Is that a deal? So I walked out of the bank, the biggest check I've seen in my life.
Yeah.
Went down to the grumpy old bank manager, the other place.
Yeah.
I said, here's your money. And of course he said, oh, I said, don't worry, I'm fine. No excuses and so on.
Yeah.
I'm fine, I just want to close the account.
Yeah, yeah. And you went
Anyway.
over there.
That was the good old days.
Yeah. And
So-
was the Denmark good for business then? Like you've grown quite a business in Denmark, you know?
Yes,
And
Denmark has one advantage, is it's totally free of any kind of corruption, except maybe on the local scenarios with the communities and so on. There could be a little bit of one guy helps the other guy. But corruption, I've never come across corruption in Scandinavia of any kind.
quite transparent, open.
Totally transparent,
Yeah.
totally honest, straightforward. It is an easy business environment.
Okay.
So that helps a lot. You
Yeah.
don't have to worry about things
Paying
that
off
are-
this or that
no,
or that. Yeah.
never ever.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's very good. We have high taxes and so on, but we have a very secure country. So it's a good business environment, yeah.
Okay.
So I made 8 shops in quite rapidly,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all successful. And we made virtually no advertising because we have the club, and we asked the members to recruit other members.
That
and
was
so
your
on.
advertising
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
It was all direct to the customer. We made our own newspaper, so it was like, you can say, it was like what you would do today on the internet,
Yeah.
but before there was any internet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I had so many advantages about having the customer so close. And that also was a help for me when I was on the product committee in NAD Electronics. Because when Eric Edwardson was hired, he was our first, let's say, real scientifically based engineer.
Right.
I
And was
al-
he doing work before?
He was working at Dolby. He was one of the first employees at Dolby.
Oh, okay.
So he was also a good friend of Ray Dolby.
Okay.
So I met Ray Dolby with Eric a
Yeah.
couple of times.
And now, were you still involved with NAD then at the time, at the product level?
I was right, when I started with NAD, I got involved in the product.
And you,
Side.
that remained still?
That
I have
remained,
it.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So I was there when we decided, I think we were 4 or 5 people in the room, 6 maybe something, to make the 3020.
Yep.
That was the first.
Landmark amplifier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not an engineer at all, but I'm very good at asking stupid questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew at that time that the Japanese receivers and so on, they had really fantastic specifications. But they didn't sound very good. There was crackly sound, it was not good. And
Yep.
I had a great American sound amplifier at that time, privately,
Mm-hmm.
who could deliver a lot of current. And I realized, you don't need a lot of watts if you have enough current.
Yep.
There was some basic things very right about that Jim Bongiorno those designs.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the things I said, why don't we work on the amplifier in terms of, it should not just be able to drive a resistor,
Mm-hmm.
but an actual loudspeaker,
Right.
because that is what
What
an
it needs to
amplifier is
do.
commonly used for.
Yeah.
So of course Eric was exactly right.
Yeah.
And why don't we consider the fact that we should play music, not sine waves?
Yeah.
Because that's also a different thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we took it, all the guys said, oh, they caught onto that, and Eric also, and why don't we design it to work with an actual cartridge,
Right.
not only a theoretical
Got it.
load?
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of that came together like in a few hours. Yes, of course, we should design it for music, and to drive a loudspeaker, and to be used with a cartridge,
Yeah. Yeah. What you need it for.
and not to have any fabulous short-term specifications that are
Yeah.
useless.
Yeah.
So that was and then of course Eric did all the hard work of designing the 3020.
And those early NAD amplifiers were known for a low price and moderate power output, like 20 watts per channel, was
Yeah.
a 30 watt, but high current capability for short bursts,
Sure.
which was music signals. Yeah,
Exactly.
and you could get it at a low price.
Yep.
And all of that, and it was
Yep.
sufficient for most people. I looked at the 3020. I ended up with a 3140, which came out
Yeah,
after.
a little bit later.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the 3020 of course became a
Oh,
giant success.
Yeah.
Manufacturing quality was a little bit so-so because we were made in Taiwan before Taiwan was
The
really...
knobs kind of moved and that sort of
they
thing.
kind of popped out, and the plastic fell off and things like that.
There was that
But
problem.
But it sounded so amazing.
Yeah.
I was visiting a shop in Singapore 5 years ago, and he had a 3020.
Yeah. It's a classic.
Yeah, I said, you're not selling that. I said, you know what I use it for? Every time a new hopeful amplifier manufacturer comes and wants to sell his amplifier, I just compete to the 3020, compared to the 3020.
Yeah.
And half of them, they give up right away.
Yeah. And you think that's 1980, 43 years ago. Yeah.
So it was a wonderful product.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was involved with NAD like that, and of course selling a lot of NAD in HiFi Klubben. Then in '82, in '81, '82, I got B&W distribution for Denmark.
Okay.
Denon distribution.
Had HiFi Klubben gone beyond Denmark then?
No.
No.
Then we bought a company in Norway which had distribution in Norway. I bought a company in Sweden which had distribution. We expanded the HiFi Klubben to Norway and Sweden. That was in the mid-'80s.
Okay.
And everything was going very well. It was very profitable and so on. I made a lot of mistakes. Then in '83, I started DALI loudspeakers. And that actually was a little bit of an offspring of me manufacturing Servin Vega loudspeakers for Europe.
Oh, you were actually manufacturing them, not just distributing them. And yes.
I was manufacturing, getting the cabinets manufactured, and we assembled the speakers.
Okay.
Because at that time the dollar had gone up to twice the price, and all of a sudden it was almost impossible to sell American products. You know, the dollar spiked
Yeah.
at almost twice the average value over a short period of time. So then we started to build cabinets in Denmark, higher quality than they did in the US, which did not say much, but it was good quality. And we designed some Servin Vega speakers in Denmark also, which now are the best selling of the vintage.
Yeah, I was going to say
Servin Vega
they're
speakers.
vintage, kind of a collectible. Yeah.
So that was how I got a bit set my foot into manufacturing.
Okay.
And then we felt that we could make some speakers that would fit very well to HiFi Klubben, very high quality, low price, good performance. There was kind of a lack in the market for that kind of product.
DALI was, I understand, the house brand.
Yeah, so yeah, DALI was the house brand for HiFi Klubben. And we made the DALI 2, 3, 4, and then we made the DALI 7, and we were very successful. We made some really good speakers.
And you never anticipated DALI go beyond that at the time. It was HiFi Klubben, or was there?
It was a little bit. Then I had a good friend in Japan, and he said, oh, these speakers are really good. Then we sold some to Japan, and we sold to Japan ever since.
Okay.
And DALI is a very well-known brand in Japan from that time already. So we gradually expanded, and we made some good speakers, good designs. I hired some really talented people to do crossover design mathematically and so on. We did the DALI 40, which was a very complex design with balanced woofers and so on.
Who was doing the designs?
Pardon?
Who was doing the designs?
I did the cosmetic design at that time, which was not much. It was there goes a tweet. But we had a couple of engineers working for us. Actually, two of the people working for us were students from Danish Technical University who worked in our shop in Copenhagen. They moved over and started working for DALI. And we had a guy called Christian Hoffman also, who was like a gopher. He did everything in the company. He also designed speakers.
Okay.
So it was tiny at that time in terms of engineering. But there was one time when they just reminded me that at one time I had just asked one of the guys to go over to Brilliant Care. You have a budget of $500,000, buy what you need.
Okay.
And they were like, what? And they just bought the best thing we could buy from Brilliant Care to really get going.
Because there's a picture of you breaking ground where the DALI facility is. Yeah.
I had a bit more hair at that time. But that was the real factory.
Yeah.
And we were assembling Servin Vega speakers. We were making speakers OEM for a German company also at that time. And then the DALI speakers. And it grew and it grew, and it was really good. And then in, I don't know the exact date when I hired Lars War to be the CEO.
I think he started as acoustic engineer. He told me as I interviewed him yesterday, and I believe 91. He said something like that.
Could
90,
be,
yeah,
yeah,
in around there.
Yep. The story is I had the head of acoustics at the university in Aarhus. He was a very good friend. He worked for my company also with difficult stuff in acoustics and so on. And he called me one day and he said, "Peter, I have a student. You hire him."
Okay.
I don't know what you're going to use him for, but he's the best student I ever had.
Okay.
Yeah. So I visited Lars War a few days before he had to graduate from university. And he was sitting in his little room and he was working on his PC, on his final things for passing the exam and so on. And he had a sign on his wall saying, "Real men don't make backups." And of course, his computer crashed.
Yes, I was going to say, I used to be a computer guy, and yes, you do make backups.
But anyway, I hired him, and he started as an acoustical engineer.
Yeah.
And it took me a few years until I convinced him to be the CEO. And after that, it's been a dream.
Yeah, because he's unique in that he's a CEO, obviously, but he's deeply into all the products.
He is. Yeah. And if you ask him about the intricacies of a tube amplifier, he knows about that also.
Yes.
Or the American Constitution and why it's constructed in the way it is. So he's a universal smart guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But he's also he's a very good businessman. You know, he looks at how to do things the most rational way and to make a good product and so on. We have a wonderful working relationship. I never had to worry about DALI.
Yeah, because you still own DALI.
Oh, I have the majority. I have 56% of the shares.
Okay.
And the rest is with the staff.
Oh, very good. Now, before we go on, Denmark's kind of a hotbed. I think it's got to be per capita the most number of hi-fi companies.
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
and you got Bang & Olufsen here.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you ever have any collaborations with other Danish companies, or were you just on your own?
I happened to become very good friends with one of the sons of the original founders of B&O, Jens Bang.
Okay.
And he became a very good friend.
Okay.
And mentor.
Oh, okay.
At the time where he was more or less kicked out of B&O, he had designed the B&O Penta loudspeaker.
Okay.
The pentagonal shaped floor standard. Because he had spent so much money, an insane amount of money, on designing a speaker that nobody thought would have a future. They had asked the guys in Holland, I think it was, how many can you sell in a year? They said 5 pairs.
Okay.
That project was almost cancelled. And he was ridiculed for having spent so much money on that crazy product, a price that would be crazy, and fully active. And what
year about was that?
That would have been, that would be 70, late 70s. Yeah, way ahead of its time.
Yeah, oh yeah, B&O did a lot of things ahead of its time, yeah.
But he became a very good friend. And you know what happened with the Penta speaker? It became the best-selling loudspeaker in the history of the universe, more or less. They sold, I think, I don't know the exact numbers, but I would think 250,000.
That's why you can't trust the accountants sometimes to run a company.
No, they have no idea.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. But oftentimes you don't know what's going to be a hit.
Yeah. He became a very good friend. And even at the time when I was ostracized in the business because I was doing HiFi Klubben, which was a competitor to everybody else, you know, he was continued to be a very good friend.
Okay.
And he was actually a little bit instrumental to my decision to sell NAD, because when I worked on this high...
and when was that, though, that you actually purchased NAD?
I purchased NAD in 90... It was a little bit blurry, because NAD was not a financially sound company.
I know they had troubles.
They always had troubles.
Yeah.
And I was a guy who was making money. So I bought some shares. And whenever they had... and all of a sudden... whoa, Peter, now you're the majority shareholder. You have to come to London and tell people what to do.
Okay.
And I went to London. They had an office in London and in Boston at the time.
Mm.
I went to London and said, now guys, you have to help me figure out how to do this company.
You're right.
And everybody was shocked because the management structure in UK and in Denmark, totally different. You know, if I have a problem, I always go to everybody and say, I have a problem, help me. If you do that in the UK at that time, people would say, now we have a manager who doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were shocked.
Mm.
Of course, I wanted to have their ideas, and you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was not a good message to come to. But anyway, I owned NAD. All of a sudden, we sent. First, we had Gord Simonstad was helping with the management
Of Lenbrook.
Of Lenbrook, yes.
Because they were distributing?
They were distributing in Canada.
Yeah.
But anyway, later on, when David didn't have time to do much of that anymore, we sent over a manager from Denmark, actually one from Norway first, from a Norwegian organization, then from Denmark. And I loved the company. I loved the people working there. I see still Taras Valgama and so on, they're still working there and so on. But it became too much. I couldn't manage all of that, and I was.
And HiFi Klubben and the
HiFi
distribution.
Klubben, yes.
And were you owning any other companies at the time?
I owned Gryphon Audio.
At the time?
Gryphon Audio,
Okay.
which was a little bit the same situation that Flemming Rasmussen, who was a good friend, he had financial troubles. I bought the company. I said, you can buy it back, you know, whenever and so on. And I bought Snell Acoustics, also because they needed a partner.
Yeah.
And it was then at Snell Acoustics that we started the project with room correction.
Right.
But actually, room correction ideas came to my mind already when I owned NAD, because Marty Boris and some of the engineers had always been talking about the future of audio would be in digital, and once you could do enough computational power, there would be wondrous things you could do to compensate for deficiencies in rooms and so on.
Did you own any other companies? Because those are the ones I knew about: Snell, Gryphon.
Snell, Gryphon, NAD, of course, HiFi Klubben, DALI.
And this is before TacT, that company got
that
started.
Was before
Before
TacT.
all that, because we'll get to that. Yeah.
I don't know how many hours we have, but but
that's the key.
I became the owner of NAD late 80s, more or less. You know,
because I've always called him like this Danish hi-fi entrepreneur. So what happened was you had some very successful businesses.
Yeah.
Companies needed help.
Yeah.
You were willing to invest.
Well, if they were companies who could do really, really good sound.
Okay.
If it has nothing to do with really, really good sound, I'm not game.
Okay.
You can come with me with any kind of deal. If it's not about good sound, I'm.
So is it safe to say you obviously needed to make money, wanted to make money, but you wanted to do something?
Yep.
Yeah, useful, not just make money.
Yes, and I've been so interested in pushing the boundaries of good sound and all of that's overwhelming for me, and I get totally entangled in new ideas and so on, and I defocus on the big business sometimes.
Yeah, because there are people who have been in audio and probably still are in audio who are just purely looking at it from a dollars and cents point of view and not pushing the boundaries. And we'll get at that.
Yeah, and of course, maybe that's a life, I don't know.
But it's more interesting to push the boundaries.
I like to push the boundaries. Sometimes it's been costly. You know, I bought NAD and I sold it something like 10 years later.
To Lenbrook.
To Lenbrook,
which was the company that still has it.
Yes, and that was a really good decision for NAD.
Yep.
Because now you had an owner who really focused on that as a main issue.
And NAD is doing remarkable today.
They are doing very, very well, and they've done Blue Sound, which is fabulous, and I compliment the team there to take that huge risk and step. That's fantastic. It's really good product and so on.
Gryphon went on to different hands. Yep.
Different hands, and Flemming still had an ownership until he retired a few years ago. Yeah, it was all pretty good. Snell Acoustics was kind of a interesting story because I became partner with Bill Osgood, so we were 50-50 partners. And I liked Snell originally because Peter Snell had some really good ideas about room acoustics, speaker-room interaction. He just knew the basics of that it's not just a speaker.
Right.
It's a speaker and a room. Unless you live outside in a tent or whatever. You have a speaker and a room, and you have to consider both things.
Yep.
That was always on his mind.
Yep.
But of course, when I bought my half share of Snell, Peter Snell had already passed away, and Kevin Vakes was the speaker engineer.
Who went on to Harman after that. Yep.
Yes. Bill Osgood, who's not in this business anymore. I don't know where he is. I think he changed his name. He screwed me, to say it bluntly.
Okay.
He fell in love with one of the office ladies. And all of a sudden she had a farm and she has a few horses and a car and whatever, and the company had no money. It was so bad that I took him to my lawyer in Boston at that time. And the lawyer said, Mr. Osgood, we've analyzed the numbers. What would you prefer you do? You sell your shares to Peter Lyngdorf for $1, or we call the police? So,
guess you got the shares.
Yeah, that was in '96, and I thought Snell had been doing quite well, but well, it actually had.
Yeah.
But Bill Osgood was always flying first class with his mistress from the office, who became his wife and all of that. So there was no money in the company. So
Right.
I was there with Snell Acoustics, and I ended up selling it to Boston Acoustics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because they were very good friends. And of course, Boston Acoustics was a public company, an American public company, which means that they had to be so meticulous about that deal that the lawyers went with all the money. The transaction cost more than the value of the company. It was crazy. I'd never experienced anything like that.
And Snell is gone.
And Snell is gone because they tried to make a modern version of, Snell should have continued with the what they were doing, what they were good at, but just didn't happen.
Yeah.
That was unfortunate.
But then, so in the 90s, you got involved with creating TacT.
Then the thing was that the room correction situation was really started in Snell Acoustics.
That was in its infancy then.
Yes. And at Snell, we had a consultant called Radomir Bozovic, who could actually do the algorithms and so on, and could do some shortcuts in terms of downsampling for lower frequencies and so on, so we could have enough resolution in a correction system. And he was damn smart in algorithms. Kevin was smart in acoustics. I was kind of smart in acoustics also, or knew what the problems were. Yeah. And one of the reasons I was so keenly interested in room correction was also, I was running a retail business. And I was always shocked, we sell DALI speakers. We know how damn good they sound. And then I come to visit somebody who has a pair of DALI speakers and say, this is not the sound that we made, because they put it in a different environment and sound totally different. Yeah. So that is our key problem in this industry, is to take care of that so we can deliver a consistent, good performance in people's homes, not only in our demo rooms or in our labs or whatever. So I wanted to do room correction, and I knew that it would be possible. And Bozovic could do the algorithms. And in December '92, we presented a 6-channel correction system and won a couple of technology awards or so things.
Under what company?
That was under Snell.
Under Snell.
DSP 6000.
Okay.
I have one at the DALI factory, I think.
Okay.
Awful. Awful in terms of the layout and things like that. But it actually, we could measure the frequency response, and we could do correction with the 0.6 hertz resolution.
Okay.
In '92. Yeah. Which nobody thought would be possible.
Yeah.
So anyway, we came out with the Snell system, but in '96, what's his name? Bill Osgood ran away with whatever, had to sell the company, and then Sandy Berlin
Mm-hmm.
from Madrigal called me and said he wanted to buy half the company
That's
and
right.
be my
Snell
partner
did, yeah.
in Snell Acoustics.
Yeah.
I said, wow, that sounds like a good idea. So he would move to Boston and set up his home there. And he would run Snell, and he would sell it to Sidney Harman in a few years when we
Yep.
made it really profitable.
Yeah.
So let's do that. I said, Sandy, sounds like a good idea. I went to Boston, met him, and we discussed, and we more or less agreed, the structure of everything. I thought it would be wonderful because he had all the experience. He had just sold Madrigal to Sidney Harman.
Yeah.
Bingo. He was personal friends with Sidney Harman. So I had that meeting, and then 2 weeks later, I went to Boston again. We had kind of the final meeting, and then I don't hear a thing. What's happening here? There was no word back. And then I get a call from Kevin Wakes. Oh, Peter, I'm sorry, I have a job now with Harman.
Just hired him.
It was a headhunting trip. And they also tried to headhunt Bosovic, who had done the correction system. But Bosovic didn't want to have anything to do with him. He didn't trust a lot of people anyway. So Bosovic and I started TacT Audio.
Ah, okay.
And we continued to do the correction system, so we got some terrific reviews, and it was all the same, we did the measurements, and you could do absolutely wonders with the correction. And I was all the time trying to work out how to make it sound good, and it would never really work. We could do it perfectly, absolutely perfectly. When we did the control measurement, it was ruler flat. It was exactly what we wanted. I coined the phrase target curve. Before that, it was only points, but the phrase target curve is mine.
Okay.
Because I drew it up and said, we have to do something like that. We have to include the room gain and the response and all of that.
Yeah.
So we always did the target curve, and we could follow the target curve like a charm. Will work every time. Bingo. It sounded like shite. And not really, but I would spend 2 or 3 days to modify the curves and up and down and and it never really did something where you just say, bingo, I got rid of my room problems. But my speakers still sound wonderful. We never achieved that with that technology. So anyway, with TacT Audio, we were becoming quite successful, but then honestly, Bosovic, he got a brilliant idea, he thought.
Was the Millennium Amp?
Millennium Amp was an offspring that was a different, everything gets complicated now.
Okay.
Because we did TacT Audio, and then Lars Risbo, thank you for bringing me back on track.
Yeah.
Lars Risbo.
Who you're working with today.
Who I'm working with today. He was introduced to me in '96 by a very good friend. And he showed me his ideas about making a fully digital amplifier. At that time, he worked for a very famous company. But they didn't really want to support his pursuit of the perfect Class D fully digital amplifier because they were interested in something that was cheaper. And this was not going to be cheaper
At the time,
for
yeah, it was
foreseeable future. So I talked to Lars, and he explained to me what he wanted to do and all of that. And I heard a very early prototype, and it was a bit noisy. There was something, it was noisy. But there was something about the way it plays the violin and the cello and so on. I thought, there's something here that is not there that I really appreciate is not there. And it's like the tone of a typical amplifier at that time. It didn't have its own tone. It was just the texture of the instrument in a different way. So I said, oh, we have to do this, Lars. And so I decided to do the Millennium amplifier.
Yeah.
Lars Risbo's design and some of his really good friends who are brilliant, who are also working now with me, Toccata and so on.
At Purify, which we'll get to.
Yes. So Lars made his company, Toccata, which developed this, and I put up the money for the patents. There was a ton of patents. I put up all the money. I paid for the development and so on. And the deal was I was going to have special privileges and so on in the way we work together for the future and so on. And then in the year 2000, Lars sold his company to Texas Instruments. And I got all the money back for laying out the money for the patents and so on. That was all groovy, and I got a special agreement with Texas Instruments that whatever they do in digital amplification, they can talk freely with me and my company about and so on.
Your company at the time being Lyngdorf Audio?
That was TacT Audio.
That was TacT Audio
but
still.
It would be any company that I'm involved in.
Okay.
So, and Lars became head of engineering for TI Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And they have done, I don't know how many billions of his designs now. It's in the billions.
Right, right.
And, but Lars and I kept our friendship, always talked and met and so on. And in 1915, Lars came to me and said, 2015.
Sorry,
yes, 2015. Thank you for. Lars said he now wanted to do a company with Bruno Putzis.
Yeah.
And me.
Yeah.
Lars.
That was Lars's initiative, not yours initiative.
That was really Lars and Bruno, and I don't know, you know, it's always difficult to see who came up with the idea.
I figured you went to them to gather up kind of the most...
No, Lars Risbo and Bruno Putzis, they were in total disagreement about who was the best engineer in the world. Lars thought it was Bruno, Bruno thought it was Lars.
Okay.
So that was kind of a funny story. So when we started talking, I was all keen on bringing them together because they're so different.
Yeah.
But they're so brilliant in so different ways. I thought that combination is going to be...
Because they do kind of have overlapping but different disciplines.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a magnificent combination. If we could get those two guys to put their brains together.
And sometimes you can't get two engineers like that to work together.
Oh, they work
even be in the same room together.
You know, when they're together, I cannot follow what is happening.
Okay. So and they get along.
They get along.
Okay.
Yes. So anyway, we very quickly decided to make a new company with the aim of making new amplifier technology which would correct for the errors inherent in loudspeaker drivers.
Right.
Because Lars and Bruno thought all of that could be ameliorated by the proper amplifier design. And then Lars rented a space with Carsten Tinggaard, who is now the part in the Purify Transducer technology company.
Yes.
So, and Carsten Tinggaard was the CEO, the technical director for Scanspeak, Vifa, and Peerless before.
Yeah.
So he knows a thing or two or three about speaker design.
Yeah.
And all the practicalities of making speakers and all that. So Lars rented an office with Carsten Tinggaard, who was developing drivers for Genelec and for a lot of companies. He was developing the drivers. And Lars then discussed with Carsten Tinggaard also, you know, how to do an amplifier. They had some crazy ideas about amplifier design, including speed, DSP and A to D and D to A. Crazy stuff that I cannot fathom what was happening. But then Lars said, well, let's better find out what is happening in the speaker driver. And he started to question Carsten Tinggaard. So how do you measure that? How do you measure that? How do you measure that? And then Lars said, but that's very insufficient measurements. You really don't know what you're doing. So Lars starts to put his brain to work, also with Bruno and Carsten. How can we make a measurement system to really understand what is happening in the driver? And Lars started to work on that and do different kinds of measurements. And all of a sudden he discovers that, whoa, something strange happens in speaker drivers. And he could now measure exactly what was happening. And basically that is what we call ion distortion. Mm-hmm. And that is totally chaotic. And it has a memory. So it's really what we call shite. It's really, really bad because it's not something you can predict.
Right.
It's not something you can compensate for electronically or digitally. You have to make a better driver design. So Lars and Bruno and Carsten worked then on a new measurement technology, which we now call Redbox.
Right.
So they spent, I think, 2 years before they had the whole measurement technology up and running.
And to be clear on Purify, Purify is not a consumer audio company in the sense of, I don't know if you ever plan to make products that come to market, but it doesn't seem like it.
Not
It
really,
makes amplifier modules, it makes drivers.
Yeah.
And I guess it's got this measurement system now that is going to be used not publicly.
Not public. It's being used by DALI.
Which is a sister company?
Well, because I'm not the majority owner of Purify. I'm about 30% owner of Purify. I'm the financier.
Okay.
But Lars Bruno has about the same that I have
Okay.
in Purify, the amplifier company and so on. It's a little bit complicated, but anyway.
It's fine.
But we're kind of sister companies, correct, yeah.
Yeah, and then they're using it.
Yes.
Now let's backtrack then a bit. Lyngdorf Audio came in. Okay, so TacT, I know there's a whole story and it could take an hour, so it went away.
TacT went away because Bozovic, when we finally were going to make it, we had enough product. We would have the first year with a real profit. He got the brilliant idea that he, out of the blue, created a new company called SMA Lab.
I remember there was a messy thing happening. Yeah.
Which got the exclusive distribution of all TacT products on the internet.
Right.
And he thought he could do that. And he said he didn't know who was SMA Lab, but they were really good guys. It was actually his daughter. So, of course, it totally ruined the company.
Yeah.
It was from one day to the next. We had orders like crazy. It was gone. So I had to start from scratch. And then I put Lyngdorf on the product. I said
Lyngdorf Audio.
Lyngdorf Audio. Then
And what year was that?
That was 2002.
Okay, so shortly after.
We carried on TacT. On the amplifier side was easy because we had all the connections with TI. We had very good engineers on the amplifier side. And the TI people, Lars Rispo and so on, they loved working with us because our guys know exactly what to do. Really brilliant guys on power supplies, so on. So we're still the only company who uses a fully active power supply to control volume. So we get much more performance out of the TI chips than anybody else because we have all the background info and so on. But anyway, so we continued with Lyngdorf Audio, but we didn't have our engineer for room correction. So I thought, I've been working on this for 10 years, and I spent day and night listening and so on.
And had the RoomPerfect name been?
Nope.
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 Okay, that's coming.
That's coming, yeah. So I decided, that was around about the same time we had the first connections with Steinway and Sons. So I decided now we have to do...
Because there's Steinway Lyngdorf as well.
Yes.
Which is a collaboration with Steinway.
Steinway and Sons,
yeah.
So we had to do our own correction system. And then I hired a ton of engineers. Jan Abelgaard was the chief DSP engineer from B&O. We had the chief engineer from TC Electronics, one of the world's biggest professional digital products companies, and a lot of other guys. We hired close to 30 engineers. I said, now we do a new room correction system. But this time, you are not going to see what we did before. I'm not going to give you anything. You're not allowed to look at it.
Just start from scratch.
You start from scratch, because that pursuit of creating the inverse of a measured response, no matter how you try to smooth it, average and all of that, it does not work. It creates side effects. And the evidence of that was that everybody who bought a Lyngdorf or the old TacT correction system, they were fiddling and fiddling and fiddling and fiddling. And then when they finally gave up fiddling, they wanted to change the power supplies of the amps because they thought that must give this harsh whatever sound was wrong. It was not the power supply, it was not the amp, it was the correction system that made artifacts. And so I said, we start from scratch. You have to start completely from scratch. I got an epiphany in Germany because I had to compete with another guy, a professor, doctor something, who had designed a system where you could calculate the correct position of your loudspeaker in the room based on the room dimensions, the materials and everything like that to give you an even frequency response. That was his approach. My approach was I put the woofers in the corner, I put the mid-highs where I need to have them for the good imaging. and I want to have as little as possible of the signal going the wrong way before it goes the right way, which means corner placement of the woofer, higher crossover frequency, and so on. I explained the whole situation. Of course, we have terrible frequency response, but we don't have excess phase in the room for all the initial signal.
Right.
So in that way, we can do a frequency correction, and it's going to take care of everything, because we start with a good impulse response,
Yep.
and then we can correct the frequency response. It's easy. And this professor said, yes, but Lyngdorf, you know that if you have the best possible frequency response, you always also have the best possible impulse response. And then it dawned on me, that is absolutely correct if you live in a two-dimensional space. But one, we cannot have sex there. We cannot live there.
Yeah.
It does not really work for us
Right.
as a species.
Yes.
Because in
It's
a real room,
three-dimensional space.
the fact that you end up with a good frequency response is just a coincidence of the direct sound, that reflection, that reflection, that reflection, the different time delays, all adding up to an energy response that's more or less flat. But when you have that situation, by averaging all these different responses, you also have blurred the time response as much as you could possibly do.
Okay.
And then this guy walked out of the room. Because I think at that time it also dawned on him, yes, it's a different thing. So just measuring a frequency response in one point tells you diddle about what you need to correct.
Right.
Actually, it tells you about 15%. That's what we think now.
Yeah.
But if you don't know the whole room, you know nothing.
Because RoomPerfect is about, I know, measuring in different parts of the room until it learns the room.
It learns the room, and it learns what the speaker wants to do. And it learns the dispersion characteristics of the speaker, and it can sort of find out what is the natural response for this speaker.
Okay.
So what we're doing, we're not trying to change your B&W speaker to sound like a totally different brand, because we assume that you bought the B&W speaker because you like that speaker. Okay. But now you're stuck with your room, and your room creates a lot of problems. So we make a room correction system. We don't make a speaker correction system.
So your system, RoomPerfect now,
Yeah.
it's called,
Yeah.
susses out the room from the speaker. That's
From
what
the
it was.
speaker, yes. It's very complicated. You know, people think that it's a very, very simple system because we don't show a frequency response.
Right.
And that is exactly on purpose, because the frequency response, when you just measure a response, give you very rudimentary information when you are in a normal room with all the reflections, all the reverb and so on. You really can't use it for anything. You can use it in a studio or in an anechoic chamber,
Yeah, yeah.
because then you can do any correction and it's going to be fine, because you don't have a delayed signal also.
Right.
But once you have all the delayed signals, it's a totally different ballgame.
And so RoomPerfect has been a product within your products, and
Yes.
other companies license it.
Yes.
Macintosh has got it and
Macintosh,
whatnot.
yeah.
It's still not a work in progress, but it's still progressing, right? Always?
No.
No, it's done?
No, we call it RoomPerfect.
Okay.
We didn't call it Room Almost Perfect. Right?
Okay. So it is done?
It was done.
Okay.
It was done. It took about a year.
Okay.
But the basic correction algorithm is the same.
Okay.
Was not modified.
And what year in around was that?
That was 2004, about
Okay.
that time. But everything that is complicated about RoomPerfect is inside the unit. The measurement, the way we do the measurement, the way we look at how the measurements combine. We take all the time information out of the individual measurements, because you know what a lot of people are doing, they're using 3 or 4 microphones at the same time. But that is blurring the time information. So that destroys your actual information. So that's why we use single point. It's actually so complicated that if I have to get into that train of thought, it takes me half an hour, 1 hour.
And so, okay, so RoomPerfect, That's and Lyngdorf Audio. So there's a collaboration with Steinway Lyngdorf, and I guess the similarity between the two companies, they're very design conscious companies, in the sense of when I see the Lyngdorf, this is a Lyngdorf product right here, but also Lyngdorf has these small little speakers and subwoofers. Was that a conscious effort too, to optimize sound in the room to make it attractive? Like this kind of, DALI is the traditional, more or less, kind of speaker, and Lyngdorf Audio is more lifestyle friendly?
Maybe it's a little bit more lifestyle friendly, and I like to use all of our digital capabilities. RoomPerfect, correction for frequency response in the speakers and so on. I'll show you later that we can do crossovers between subs and mid-high speakers at 250 hertz, 300 hertz, 400 hertz.
Yeah.
400 hertz. For instance, in my private cinema at home, I run 300 hertz crossover to
which
the
is very high for people who don't know.
It's extremely high.
Well, most people would consider it extremely high, like usually as 80 hertz.
Yeah, and that means that instead of having there's a lot that goes into our multi-channel system, which is a totally other thing. The high crossover means that our satellite speaker can be tiny.
Yeah, because you don't have to stress it.
This size, right?
Yeah.
Rather than this box. If you have a box this size, you know what? We don't have to be concerned about cabinet resonances. We don't have to be concerned about internal resonances because they're all within the wavelengths.
Right, yep.
Right?
Yep.
The driver doesn't need to go to 60 cycles. It needs to go to 200 cycles, 150 cycles, whatever. Shorter voice coil, lighter system, higher efficiency.
Yeah.
Lower distortion. All for no money. Because if you design the woofers to be good and high quality, which you have to do, they can easily handle up to 250 hertz.
Yeah.
That's not a problem.
So in the 2000s, Lyngdorf Audio and the collaboration with Steinway Lyngdorf, and Purify Audio.
Yep.
Are there any other companies I don't know of that happen in there?
No, not really. That's the companies I'm involved in now. Yes.
It's just, you didn't slow down though in the sense of the developments all happening.
No.
Okay, so let me ask you, has this been, okay, would an accountant look at your history and say, oh, these are really good investments? Or would they look and say, what would they say? In other words, I always say you're this Danish hi-fi entrepreneur, right? And I've never understood the motivation, or I guess not. I've assumed the motivation is you're really into hi-fi.
I'm too much into hi-fi. Any accountant, any sensible person who's never been caught by this virus would say I'm crazy. My very good lawyer who resigned something like 15 years ago, he wrote me a beautiful goodbye letter when he resigned he was 69 something. He said, Peter, I love working with you, but there's one thing you have to learn. Don't trust people all the time. Because he had seen how I was screwed at Snell and with Bozovic and so on, right?
Yeah.
And, so that has been a problem. Seriously, when we brought out the Millennium amplifier, I had been spending so much money on technology that when I went to the show in Frankfurt to show it the first time, I couldn't afford my hotel room. I was sleeping in the demo room.
Oh.
I was driving there in our private car with the whole gear, with the Millennium, all of that. But I couldn't afford a hotel room. I was sleeping in the small demo room. And I walked out when the show was kind of ending, I walked out to the corridor and grabbed a few of the cushions from a sofa, and I was sleeping in the room. We went one night to a restaurant because I was really hungry. So I said, oh, now we've sold a few Millenniums and so on. So now we're going to get something to eat. And we had sat down, we got the water already, we got the bread basket, everything. And then we looked at the prices, and my only idea was to say, when the waiter came, I realized it was, was a really expensive restaurant. It was very, very expensive. So you don't have any pizzas here?
Ironically, we did that the other night. And they made us a pizza.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Anyway, They didn't have a pizza, so we left the restaurant. So that was how close
We
I
got
was
the pizza.
Yeah. But at that time, I lost a lot of money on NAD.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it was only the last couple of years that it was starting to. But I think in a way with NAD, I was helpful in getting the company better in terms of product reliability and so on.
Yep.
And I did it in a very simple way. I went to the engineers and I said, you know, take the cover off one of these amplifiers. And they did. And they said, what do you think this looks like? I said, yeah, of course, but we need to blah, blah, blah. I said, you know, there's one thing we can do, and that is we have to design the product in such a way that if it ever fails, which it should not do, when anybody takes the cover off, they look into it and say, wow, what could possibly have failed here?
Yeah.
Rather than say, how did this ever work?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Make it.
So that was my mantra when I went to the guys at NAD, and we had a fantastic working relationship. I was always at the engineering and so on, but I was never so much into the finances and so on. We've been doing okay though, but I could have been a very, very wealthy man if I didn't have all these crazy ideas.
Do you regret any of that?
No.
Okay.
When I started Lyngdorf Audio, we spent so much up to 2008 because we had a couple of investors who wanted to put money into the Steinway Lyngdorf situation and so on.
Yeah.
And we showed all the new products, the new technology, the RoomPerfect, the new bass management technology and so on at CEDIA 2008. Kevin Wakes came by our presentation. He just said, Peter, congratulations. When he heard what we did. It was fabulous. And we had 4 or 5 investors ready to put in 25 million or so. I had put all of that in. And I was up to here.
Right.
And what happened 2008 September? Lehman Brothers.
Yeah.
And all the investors, they didn't even pick up the phone. It was.
Yeah.
So I was sitting there with 70 employees in SL Audio, almost no turnover, huge expenses and so on. It was expensive. Yeah, I'm trying to keep fit so I can live another 30 years.
To pay off everything.
Yeah. Oh, to recoup the investment.
Right.
Yeah. But I love to work with all these good people. I have fantastic people at SL Audio. HiFi Klubben, I have fantastic people working there.
Right.
Purify, wonders, you know. DALI, fantastic. You've been at the company. It's a fantastic company.
Oh yeah, it's one of the best speaker companies I've ever been to.
And the people working there and so on. When I visit SL Audio, I always go out to production.
Steinway Lyngdorf, yeah, SL.
Yes, Steinway Lyngdorf, yeah. I go to production first. One time I forgot to go and see the other guys. I want to talk to the production guys because they are the closest to our customers.
Right.
And they are the reason we can make reliable products. Everything, you know, they're closest to, that's one of my business principles. The people closest to our customers are the most valuable people in the company. Everybody in the management and so on, they are there to serve the guys who really do the work. And that's the salespeople in HiFi Klubben. It's the people who assemble the products. I consider them our most valuable assets. Then comes all the hierarchy, but that's downstairs.
Yeah, yeah.
And the CEO's job is to make sure that everybody can perform the best possible job towards the customer. It's not the other way around. They're not hired to please the CEO.
Right. To please the customer.
To please the customer.
Well, let me ask you this, because you know, you and I have seen hi-fi companies, and we can crap all over them if they're just run by accountants and stuff like that. So that's not this about it. And you know, there are people who will say never start a hi-fi company today, and you know, because it's too difficult, right?
It's difficult.
But I'm not one who would say just don't do that because somebody, and I don't think you're that type of person, right? Like,
no.
What advice would you give somebody who says, you know, I want to start into hi-fi. You don't want an accountant to start into hi-fi. What would you say to somebody, you know, as a lesson to say?
I would say if you've developed a really good product, make sure it also sounds good in other places if it's a loudspeaker. Because I've seen time and time again people make a prototype speaker for their home, and if they have good ears and they work really hard and they choose the right CDs and so on, they can make it sound stunning. But does it sound good with all material? Does it sound good in other rooms? That's always a question, you know. So that's job number one if you make a loudspeaker. If you make electronics and so on, you have to really be careful that it is reliable. In my company, reliability, repeatability, consistency.
Yeah.
Without that, you can forget everything. And there's a lot of company who's been able to make fabulous prototypes. Fabulous. Wonderful. But when you go into production, everything falls on the floor. So think about all those aspects, and then think about how are you going to sell it? Who's your customer? Where's your channel? How do you have your unique position in the market?
And that, I think, is something many companies miss. How are you different?
How are you different? Pick a name that is easy to remember, not a name that is almost impossible to remember, because that is just uphill.
Yes.
And that's an unnecessary extra problem.
That's a good point, unnecessary.
Yeah. So typically I say, you know, product is 20%. Production is 20%. 60% is sales, marketing, whatever you need there. And that's what a lot of people forget. And yeah, there are many issues in that, you know, pick the right people, of course.
Yeah.
A salesperson is a very different person than a creative engineer. Very different.
Yeah.
They can combine in certain cases. I've seen engineers develop into fabulous salespeople, but that's not often the case.
And so I don't know if you've thought about this, but when somebody thinks of Peter Lyngdorf, would you like to be thought of a certain way in hi-fi terms?
If I want to be remembered, you know, I want to be on the customer side. I always think about the customer. Customer is king, queen, whatever. There is nobody more important than the customer. And if we don't treat the customer with respect and so on, for instance, when we hire people in HiFi Klubben, there are two things you should never forget. Customer is the most important you have. Be honest to the customer, to the company. Customer is king. Never miss focus on the customer. Always be honest. Remember those two things. You are here forever. Forget one of those two things one time and you're out. And that's a promise. You're out.
That's good advice.
We had the best sales guy in Copenhagen. Many years ago, there was a customer banging on the door like 10 minutes after closing hours, and he gave him the finger. He was our best salesperson.
And he gave him the finger.
Yeah, he didn't need to show up the next morning.
Okay.
He was out, absolutely out. We had a sales guy in Norway selling $2,000 worth of cables for a $500 amplifier. And we told him, stop. He continued. He's out. He was very profitable for the company.
That's good advice. Because
So
longevity, right?
Yeah, you have to be able to look your customers in the eye. My phone number is not a secret number. Everybody who's a customer at HiFi Klubben can find my number and call me if they have a problem. And you know how often that happens? Once in 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Let's hope they don't watch
Because
this and start phoning you for the hell of it.
Yeah, everybody in HiFi Klubben knows that if they have a problem, you know, they can call me.
Well, that was a fascinating talk. I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.